US's third warship, USS Tripoli, is heading towards West Asia as US reportedly prepares to deploy ground troops into Iran with war entering its fourth week. Some reports have suggested of a possible US movement towards the Strait of Hormuz to deploy around 2,200 Marines for a potential operation involving Iran's Kharg Island. Just to give you a brief about what Kharg Island is, it is Iran's crown jewel and an economic lifeline through which 90% of its oil exports flow. And US bombarded military sites on the island on March 13th, but its oil infrastructure was spared. The Trump administration is reportedly considering plans to occupy or blockade Iran's strategically crucial Kharg Island to pressure Tehran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. And the latest satellite images show the USS Tripoli is presently in India's backyard in the South Indian Ocean, signaling that Iran war may enter a new phase and a new theater in the coming days. Trump has been pressing US allies to send warships to the Strait of Hormuz, but to his surprise, the response has been muted. For Trump, his best bet might be the US Marine Corps aboard the USS Tripoli. And to secure the vital oil choke point, Trump would have to deploy US troops to Iran's shoreline. With much of Iran's naval fleet destroyed, it remains a viable option and a less risky option. Some suggest the US Marines aboard USS Tripoli could be used to seize one or more of the islands off Iran's southern coast, and these might be used as leverage or as a base to counter possible Iranian attacks on commercial ships. But amid all of these developments, Trump remains defiant, saying that he is not putting troops anywhere. But Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, on the other hand, has said that revolutions cannot happen with airstrikes alone.
We can create the conditions, but they have to, they have to exploit those conditions at a certain point. It is often said that you can't do revolutions from the air. That is true. You can't do it only from the air. You can do a lot of things from the air, and we're doing, but there has to be a ground component as well. There are many possibilities for this ground component, and I take the liberty of not sharing with you all those possibilities.
No, I'm not putting troops anywhere. If I were, I certainly wouldn't tell you. Iran is a serious threat to the world, to the Middle East and to the world. And everybody agrees with me. I think virtually every country agrees with me on that. So I wanted to put out that fire. And I said, if I do that, oil prices will go up, the economy will go down a little bit. I thought it would be worse, much worse, actually. I thought there was a chance it could be much worse. It's not bad, and it's going to be over with pretty soon.
Viewers, the arrival of USS Tripoli holds significance. On board are 2,200 troops from the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, who are based on Okinawa in Japan. The troops are trained in ground and aviation combat, raids, assaults, and amphibious operations that require ship-to-shore movements. And USS Tripoli has the ability to support such marine operations from sea itself. In fact, News 9's managing editor Kartikeya Sharma weighs in on whether US boots on the ground will escalate and what does Netanyahu mean by a ground component. Listen in.
Let me straight away go to Ambassador Veena Sikri first. Madam, when Netanyahu says ground component, what are we supposed to make of it?
Well, the big question, the $1 billion question now is whether the airstrikes of the last 3.5 weeks are going to be supported by ground operations, by sending troops into Iran. And we know that for some time there has been a lot of talk that the Americans have committed to sending the 2,500 strong Marine Expeditionary Force into Iran, and that's being talked about. But also this internationalization of the conflict is very, very serious, and I really hope that that this doesn't happen, that there's a commitment that no ground troops will be used. But as you rightly pointed out, Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel is making every effort to push towards ground troops being used.
Okay.
And whether that commitment is already there, because even the attack on the South Part's gas field of Iran, it happened from Israel, but America said they had no knowledge, when we know that the CENTCOM and Israeli air attacks are working together. So there's a lot of...
Okay.
Well, the ambassador rightfully spoke about an international component to this conflict, but I believe that the international nature of the threats emerging from the Iranian regime have to start with been one of the reasons for this coordinated military operation. Israeli officials, US officials have been targeted and have been threatened by the IRGC and the Al-Quds forces for many, many years, just as much as pretty much every dissenter from Iran, exilians who were only recently hardly coming out of a potential attack. There was the famous attacks in 2019 in Paris. So this is really one of the reasons that shows us that the Iranian regime is not just a threat to their own people by massacring them in the tens of thousands, and because of their horrific human rights atrocities against minorities. It is also, of course, a threat to the state of Israel for the decades of funding proxy terrorists who later slaughter Israeli civilians, and because of the ballistic missiles, which today already can reach both the south of Europe and also, I'm afraid, some parts of India. And that is before speaking about the nuclear capabilities. And if you take all of that together, I don't believe there was much of a choice than what we are seeing right now, which is an unprecedented coordinated operation between the US and Israel, which has one goal and one goal alone: to ensure that this global threat will no longer be a harm to the free societies in this world.
Okay, General Sudhakar ji, coming back to the issue of the boots on the ground, in your opinion, are we talking about holding the ground, or are the Americans looking at special operations inside Iran? And for the for the viewers, what's the difference?
Yeah, Kartikeya, good evening. Thank you for inviting me for your show, and my very warm greetings to distinguished co-panelists. Well, the question which you have raised is boots on ground. Boots on ground could be by covert means and by overt means. What you and me keep hearing and reading is generally by overt means. Even that overt means also has got covert means. In the instant case, one has to understand the size of this country and the terrain, the topography. The size is approximately 2,330 kilometers northwest to southeast, around 1,800 to 2,200 kilometers west to east. The kilometers I am talking of. And starting from west to northwest, north, northeast, going on to the extreme end of eastern flank, it is all covered with very high mountains going as high as to 14,000 feet, got a lot of peaks and very rugged terrain, is not suitable for A or V vehicles for, going across the terrain or the grain of the country. Now, the only possible avenue is from the Pakistan side, where they have a common border of 909 kilometers. This is the only opening which has got isolated hills, or in military parlance, they call it knolls, and they have desert terrain, multiple avenues available for any military offensive or any kind of action in a collective form. My assessment suggests that if at all the boots on ground is being contemplated, this is firstly is not going to happen overnight. It is going to be a long drawn, long haul. One, because the environment, the operational environment have to be prepared. So how do you prepare? So to answer this question, one has to identify what is the selection of aim. What aim do they have? Is it the complete regime change? They have knocked off the head of the octopus, fine. But there are multiple heads which are existing in 31 provinces. It has been decentralized. The command, control, coordination, authority, the clerical, the religious, radical elements in the authority, they have further been delegated to the 31 provinces.